Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I am here today with Lisa Tamati. For the past 25 years, Lisa Tamati has competed in the world's toughest endurance events, clocking up over 70,000 kilometers, racing everywhere from the Sahara to the Gobi to Death Valley to the Himalayas, Australia, and Europe. She has pushed her mind and body to the limits. And she's both succeeded and failed and learned many lessons along the way. Lisa has also overcome many obstacles in her personal life, from losing two babies to bringing back her mom after an aneurysm left her with massive brain damage at the age of 74. And the doctors telling her that her mother would never do anything again. Lisa proved them all wrong. Lisa knows what it takes to overcome obstacles, to chase massive goals and face your fears. And now she lives to teach, coach, and inspire people to reach their true potential, to push past the barriers of their own perceived mental and physical capabilities. Lisa is the author of three best-selling books. Her first two, Running Hot and Running to Extremes, chronicle her adventures. And her brand new book, Relentless, How a Mother and Daughter Defied the Odds, tells the one in a million comeback story of bringing her mother back from the brink of death in a 4-year odyssey that has baffled the medical fraternity. I love a comeback story, don't you? Lisa has also produced a number of adventure films, documentaries, hosted her own TV show, and she is an international speaker and podcaster herself at Pushing the Limits. Today was power packed. Oh, I'm going to have Lisa back on. We didn't get very long to talk, and I love running races. I would have loved to have dived into the whole racing aspect a little bit more. And I'm going to be on her podcast, Pushing the Limits, soon. So I'm pretty excited about that. But today we dove into mental toughness and emotional resilience, why that's important and how to develop more of it, overcoming obstacles and not letting fear rule your life, beating insurmountable odds and never giving up, why talent isn't as important as mindset, and also why emotional resilience and persistence are key factors in success. We also talked about overcoming and getting back up after a tragedy, loss, or grief. And we talked a little bit about her racing, but just the mindset that it takes to run an ultra marathon. And it was such a good listen today, so motivating and inspirational as Lisa tells us her story. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Let's dive into this episode with Lisa Tamati without further ado. I am so excited to welcome Lisa Tamati to the Sisterhood of Sweat today.
It's wonderful to be here, Linda. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh gosh, yeah. What time is it there in New Zealand?
It is 8:15 in the morning. So on a Tuesday. So we're in the future. You guys are in the past.
Yeah, we're like at about 2:18 right now p.m. in the afternoon. So, oh gosh, you are up early and at it already. Is
Oh, yeah.
uh, Lisa is basically a lot like I am. I could say I'm somewhat of an extremist. And Lisa, you are involved in extreme sports. You're an athlete, a marathoner, a runner, but you're no stranger to tragedy, loss, and grief. Uh, I would love for you to just tell the audience your story starting out.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. So yeah, I live in New Zealand, so I'm a Kiwi, and grew up in the 70s with a wonderful childhood. And I won't bore people with my childhood stuff, but had a very outdoorsy life and really into sport. And I had a dad who was really strong father, and he was really pushed us hard, and he wanted us to represent our country and be the top at what we did. And so that sort of formed me a lot as a young person, and taught me a lot of discipline. So I was a gymnast when I was growing up. Failed miserably at that when I hit my teenage years and grew too tall, and ended up with a whole lot of body image issues, as you do when you're a gymnast who's not the right shape. And so that sort of was a bit of a hiccup in my early teenage years. But then later on in life, I got into ultra marathon running, and that's sort of my background, really. So for the past 25 years, I'm now retired from it, but I've done about 25 years of extreme endurance races. So we're talking really, really long stuff, the sort of toughest races in the endurance world. So things like running through Death Valley. So I've done over 70,000 kilometers actually in that time. So a couple of thousand kilometers in the Sahara, in the Moroccan Sahara, Niger, Jordan, Libyan Desert, Gobi Desert, Western Desert, Himalayas, outback of Australia, and right through New Zealand.
How
But the funny
cool.
thing is, Linda, I've done over all those kilometers. I've had major successes and some huge failures. But I don't have any talent as a runner. So it's quite a bizarre thing to have gone into. I had no speed, and I was an asthmatic as a child, and quite a severe asthmatic, in and out of hospital. So I don't have a very good lung capacity. I don't have a very good VO2 max, which the athletes will know what that is. I'm not the right body shape to be a runner. So there's a whole lot of things that were going against me, but I just loved adventure, and I wanted to be able to push my mind and my body to the absolute limit. And I found ways around obstacles, and I found that, okay, I wasn't really fast enough to be any good at, say, like 5K or 10K or any of those sorts of distances. But where I really excelled is when it was over 100 miles or 200 kilometers, or we do everything in Ks down here, kilometers. So anything over that sort of distance, I would still be standing and still be going. And that became one of my major strengths, was that mindset. So in a nutshell, Linda, that's my background as an extreme endurance athlete, and yeah, lots of things since then.
So why did you start running, and like what made you start running? You're saying you're not a good runner, you don't have a good VO2 max, but apparently something has got you engaged to be doing these ultra marathons.
Yeah, so I have a bit of a backstory like yours, Linda. In my early 20s, I met this young man who was from Austria, and he was an extremely talented athlete, like really a gifted athlete. And he was traveling through my country on a bicycle, cycling around, and he happened to have an accident on our local mountain and got hit by an avalanche. And my mum had met him the day before, so when he got rescued, mums do these things. They invite poor strangers with nowhere to go home. And that turned into a love affair. And so we ended up going off around the world, and I, sort of slotted into
Oh
his
no,
world.
you just skipped over too much. Back up. Give me some of the details about what
But he looked
happened.
like
You
Brad
gazed
Pitt.
into his eyes, and like, give me some details.
Oh, well, yeah, it was a very, it was one of my first major relationships, and he looked like Brad Pitt. So, he sort of got away with blue murder. He was absolutely gorgeous looking and an amazing person, but he had a lot of, shall we say, issues. And the relationships started out good, as these often do. And
Yes,
then
yes.
I went overseas with him. So I left my country and we went and lived overseas in his country, and then we traveled around, did lots of cycle touring and climbing mountains and trekking and all that sort of good stuff. And that exposed me to the world, because I'd never been outside my country. And it was it was like being in a boot camp, though. It was like SAS boot camp, like
A
it was
boot camp relationship.
yeah. And over time, the power shifted, and it became a very abusive relationship, to say what it was. And I lost more and more of myself over the period of the next 5 years as I got really sort of controlled. And because I had no outside influence in our lives, it was just the two of us. We never had any friends outside. I didn't speak the language of the country I was in, for the first couple of years. I didn't have, my parents and my support networks that I would have had back home. And I was very isolated. And so when the power just slowly shifted over time and the abuse became worse and worse, and when you're in the middle of it, you sort of don't see it for what it is, and you blame
Right.
yourself,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
and this went on for a long period of time, and it was really wearing me down. And it came to a crux point 5 years in when we actually were invited to be a part of a 4-person expedition across the Libyan desert. Now, this was an extreme expedition across one of the most beautiful deserts on earth, just an incredibly beautiful place. But it was an illegal expedition that was through a military barred area on the border between Libya and
How
Egypt.
exciting.
Yeah, it was exciting, but it
It
was
was
also like
probably
terrifying.
getting your thrill of adventure. You were getting nourished in that way.
Oh yeah, yeah. We had to cover around 250 kilometers, and we had no outside help. That meant we had to carry our entire water supply and our equipment on our backs. So we had, 35 kilo backpacks, like a huge amount of weight. And back then I weighed about 59 kilos. So, I don't know how much that is in pounds, but it was a heck of a lot of weight to carry. And we only had 2 liters of water a day. And so that's, if you know anything about being in a desert and 40 plus degrees, 2 liters of water a day when you're covering 45 kilometers a day walking is not enough. But that was
Oh,
all we could
absolutely.
carry. So it was a really extreme, and we were with 2 other guys, and it was the first time we'd ever been with other people. And we were meant to be making a book. And so my partner was a photographer, and he was wanting to take photos all the time as we were walking. And the leader of the expedition, Elvis was his name, and that was his real name. And he was from Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, and he was a survival expert. And he was like saying, well, we have to cover 45 kilometers a day. So if you want to take photos, that's fine, but you've got to keep up. And so my partner wanted me to help him with the photography. And I was just physically not able to. Like, this was extreme. Like, for me, it was like I couldn't even get myself off the ground with the backpack on. It was that heavy, So I was just at the limits of my physical ability.
He forgot you were you a little smaller than
a little
him.
smaller and a little
Yeah.
not quite as strong. And I was always, in his eyes, useless, hopeless, couldn't do stuff. And I believed that, And this came to a head because I couldn't do what he wanted me to do. And then Elvis, the leader of the expedition, saw what was going on, and he was like, this is not right. You can't treat her like that. It's shocking, you can't treat her like that. So he stood up for me. And for me, that was like, oh my God, really?
That was an eye-opening moment for you.
It was an eye-opening moment because somebody else pointed out to me that this is not acceptable behavior.
Oh my gosh.
and so these 2 alpha males, if you like, over the course of the next 3 days had fights after fights. And to be fair, we were all extremely under stress because we were so dehydrated. It was awful. The torture of not having enough water made your, a short wick. So anyway, this culminated on day 4 of the expedition with the partner saying, that's it, I'm leaving. You stay with him, You got your water out, good girl.
You're making me thirsty.
And him saying to me, the relationship's over and I'm leaving in the middle of the Libyan desert. And so I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Oh my gosh, he left you in the middle of no.
Yeah.
Oh
so
my
he
gosh,
broke up with me
right there. That is a major like a violation right there, like a deal breaker.
Yes, it was a deal breaker. And I sort of suddenly, like, I started to fall apart and started to cry and thinking, and then I was like, hang on a minute, I cannot break down right now. I have to get myself out of this situation alive, and I owe it to the other two guys that I, pull my shit together, so to speak, and
Yeah,
and
right. I
don't
got
be a
you.
mess. So I had to learn to compartmentalize my emotional state from what I had to do. And that was a really good lesson, Linda, because you sometimes in life you've just got to get on with the stuff you have to do and deal with the other stuff a little bit later, in a
Right,
situation
right,
like that.
right. Yeah,
And
like survival right then was probably the most important thing. But
exactly.
let me, my mind, after going through very similar circumstances in my past marriage, uh, goes to wondering, because you talked about feeling, powerless. Like, how did
Yeah.
you, you know, in that moment, first of all, how did you become strong enough to make it through? What were you focusing on? Because would be very devastating to most of us,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
since it sounds like he isolated you and you became very dependent upon him in the
Yep.
relationship.
Yep.
And equally, how did you get your power back?
Yeah, and this that took a few years, Linda, really. It took actually a long, long time. But in that moment, I decided that I had to get out of the desert for a starters. I had to put aside the fact that he could die because he was alone out there and you twist an ankle. I had to just separate my thoughts from that and concentrate on our survival and getting through the desert for a starters. And the next few days were pretty hairy and on the edge of what was humans are possible of. And I hit the wall a few times and ended up with some major physical damage from the desert, where my kidneys were really in deep trouble by the end of it. And the dehydration really did a lot of damage to my body. But I managed to survive. And I remember at one point I was just passing out constantly from dehydration, and the guys would just put me on my feet and we'd carry on and we had to keep moving. And I managed to get through that whole ordeal, and it did turn into one hell of an ordeal. I won't go into details because it's too long a story, but we came out the other side at this other oasis, and we're having to get back into the next oasis past this military base again. So I remember coming in, and like there's these guards in the towers with their machine guns, and I'm sneaking along the wall, and I put my last lolly that I had in my mouth, and I'm thinking, I should be really terrified right now. I'm, coming out of the desert into this past this military base, trying to get to the actual oasis. My life's falling apart, but there was just no emotion. I was just so numb by this stage.
Right, right. It's like a numbing process for sure. I
Yeah,
can
you're just
relate.
like, yeah, you're just so broken and burnt out and exhausted that there's just nothing left to cry with, or to feel fear from. And um, long story short, we got out of that desert. That relationship, I had to then go back to Austria and dismantle my life there, because that had been my life. And it took 3 years to escape. Basically, it turned very, very nasty and violent, and it was a tough 3 years of of
What
of
gave
of
you the courage to leave?
Oh, I that was a turning point for me. Like you said, that was a deal breaker when you left me in the middle of the desert. That was for me like the lowest, like nobody is going to do that to me again. And it took me a long time to climb out, and I fell back into the relationship a few times, and because it was really rough for the next few years.
So,
But I managed after 3 years to sort of get out and get away and to start to then rebuild my life. And this is where running came into it, Linda, because I had lost the person that I had done all these adventures with. And that was part of it that I loved, right? And it took me 2 years really to recover physically from that desert, and a lot longer emotionally. But I was reading in a magazine one day about this race in Morocco, which was called the Marathon des Sables. Now, this is a 240K race across part of the Sahara. And it was touted as the toughest race on earth back then. And I was like, hang on a minute, that's sort of similar to what I did in the desert, except I would have support. There's doctors, you get 9 liters of water a day. I reckon I could do that. And that was the first time when I decided I'm going to do something for me that's adventurous. And I had, I didn't have him in my life anymore. So this was more of a controlled environment. And so I ended up doing that event, and it was just epic. If you imagine like this amazing like race where there's 700 runners from all around the world, you're doing this incredible race across the Sahara. Every day, this whole like military camp type setup is moving. And it was just absolutely mind-blowing for me. And the people I met there were so positive and encouraging and telling me how amazing I was, which I desperately needed because my self-esteem was just in the toilet at that point. And so that became a very an amazing experience for me that turned my life around, started to rebuild my confidence in my life. And this is why I'm so passionate about running. It's just like with you, with your fitness. It
Yeah,
proved
it's the same. It builds your confidence, and it builds belief that you did that so you can do tough things.
Yes, exactly. And it pulls you out. The discipline of having to train, like with you, with your fitness competitions and stuff, and me with my ultra marathon running, it gives you a focus, it gives you discipline and training. And as you do these races, and from there on, it was just one race after the other, back to back to back for years, and builds you up in confidence. And then other things in life start coming at you, but you've got that basis.
So, yeah, I just want to back up a little bit because I'm in agreement with everything you just said. But one thing I just want to say to people listening is you talked about him leaving you in the middle of the Sahara Desert. And I can remember so many times being left somewhere at a church picnic for crying out
Yeah, yeah.
loud, where
Yep.
somebody had to bring me and my two little children home because he got into a rage and
Yep.
at a church picnic and just left us there.
Yep.
And I remember one in particular time where we were just walking, like, I mean, we had to walk. It's, in North Dakota, it's 50 below in the winter and it
Oh,
snows a lot. It's very, very cold. And I remember we were going because I had won a contest. I named a street on the Air Force Base, and he was picking me and the two little, one was a baby and one was a toddler because they were only 18 months old, picking us up. And I don't even remember what bee got in his bonnet that day, but he like dropped us off in the middle of like this, the road, like, and we had to walk home in the snow, and I was just carrying a little baby and a
unbelievable.
toddler. And
Unbelievable.
I mean, it's just, and then at the amusement park, it was like, once you start realizing this is abuse. And I didn't recognize it either till somebody called it out.
Yeah.
It almost snuffed my life out that time. But
Yeah. Wow.
like it's this numbing process, like you said. And
Mm.
so I just want to call that out, that if somebody is leaving you somewhere, that should be a major wake up call for you, because it's very much the same type of pattern in abuse. And I just want to call that out in case
Yeah.
somebody out there is listening and they're in a relationship like that.
Yeah. And also, like it's not okay to be being told constantly that you're useless, you're hopeless, you're no good. It's not true not to believe that and not to let that power be taken away from you. It's insidious. It just happens very slowly over time that you lose more and more of yourself. And as you lose your self-esteem, then you're less likely to fight back. And it just
Right,
becomes
right.
such a circle that you're stuck in this in this situation that then is very hard often. That's the other thing, and very dangerous sometimes to leave. And that's the other thing that people often don't get. Why don't they just leave? Because that could be the end of your life, and this is not always easy to get out of. And it doesn't start off this way. This is the thing. You don't see this coming. You don't see this at the beginning. And I mean, this, we were very young, and I'm sure he's not the same person now and had a lot of his own issues to deal with, and there's no blame or anything like that. It's just about what can we learn from that situation and how do we move on from there. And so for me, the way out was rebuilding my strength, my courage, and my body
I think the thing that really you could take away is that it made you stronger and you
yeah.
made the best out of it. You didn't let it define you. And so how did mental toughness and emotional resilience come into play? And how can we develop that more in our lives to overcome tragedies, abuse, whatever we may be facing?
Yeah, this is the biggest thing that I think we need to teach our kids is that it's you're going to fail in life, and if you're going to push the limits like we do, you're definitely going to fail more often than other people, and that you have to learn to be able to get back up. It's okay to cry, it's okay to fall to pieces for a moment, and I've had quite a number of tragedies in my life, and in the moment you're down and you think there's no way up, but when the sun rises the next day, you have to keep taking another step and not to stay down and not to give up, because you can when every situation that I come across. And I want to share a story about my mum and what happened to her and how we reacted to that. But every situation that I come across, I try to go, okay, and what can I learn from this? This was absolutely horrific and I don't want to go there again, but where is the silver lining in this? Because then I learn from these experiences. And it's not that I'm searching them out, but they do happen. Life is pretty rough at times to people. I've lost a couple of babies, and I've recently lost my father, and and broken marriages, and you name it, the sort of normal stuff that people go through. It can knock you down so hard that you never get back up again, and that you just give up the fight. And mental resilience and the ability to keep pushing through boundaries is really important. So I wanted to share, if I could, Linda, about a little bit of a story about my mum. So 5 years ago, my mum had a massive brain aneurysm, which is a bleed in the brain. And this was originally that when we went to the hospital, the doctor thought that she was just having a migraine. So we had this medical misadventure because he misdiagnosed her and left her there dying basically for 6 hours. So when I finally convinced the doctor and got a friend up who was a paramedic, and she convinced the doctor to do a scan, and it came back that she had blood right throughout her brain and that she was dying, I realized that, the doctors aren't perfect, nobody's perfect, and I'm going to have to take control. And that's another very important lesson, Linda, is take control of your own life, take control of your own health. Don't give up your control to any one person, because any one doctor or expert or whatever the case may be is not always going to be perfect. None of us are. We're humans. So you have to take direction. So in this case with my mum, we had a 3-week battle for her while she was in and out of a coma and losing more and more of her brain. And the doctor, I couldn't do much in that situation because it was a critical care situation. But I promised myself that I would study everything known to man to find a way for my mum to rehabilitate. And after the 3 weeks of being in and out of a coma, and the amazing surgeons doing their work and the nurses and doctors doing a fabulous job, she survived, but she had basically no higher function left. So she had massive brain damage. And I was told at the age of 74, look, her brain is so old and she's never, ever going to recover. The brain damage is massive. Put her into an institution and make her comfortable. And I don't do comfortable. I'm allergic to the word comfortable in this sort of sense. And I was like, no, that is not happening. I am not leaving my mum in an institution. I'm going to take her home once she was stable enough, and I'm going to fight with everything I have to bring her back or die trying. That was the attitude I took. My why was very big. I loved my mum to pieces, and I was not going down without a fight. And so I started to study, and I'm not
Probably
a
why
doctor.
she's alive today.
Yeah, she is alive today. And I studied everything I possibly could. And I'm not a doctor. I didn't have a medical background, but I discovered things like hyperbaric oxygen therapy and genetics and keto diets and all of these things that are really important for brain injuries and rehabilitating her. And I spent thousands and thousands of hours of retraining her brain, because she was like a baby. She could not even push a button or know where her mouth was to put food in it, or wasn't able
Seeing
to
your
sit.
mental toughness and your emotional resilience Actually, I see it in this situation where you are determined to save your mom. And so, in a way, then that's the silver lining out of your tough situation. You came out a little more tough, right?
Yeah, I live exactly. And, it was the most incredible journey. And once, because the hyperbaric really did a lot. And after about a year, my mum started to wake up as to what was happening to her, and started to have enough intelligence to understand what was happening. And she started then to fight with me, like to help me, she would do anything I asked her to do. And the training, as you know, Linda, as athletes, we push our bodies hard. We go through a lot of pain and suffering at times to be athletes. And when you're doing a rehabilitation journey, it's even worse, because you are having to retrain and push the limits of the pain so that you can get more back. And my mum
Yes,
endured
yes.
this. She endured this arduous training routine every day, and therapies and all sorts of things. And now, to cut a very long story short, inch by inch, we regained her life. And now my mum is completely healed. She's actually
Amazing,
fitter,
amazing.
stronger, and more able than she was 5 years ago. She's now 79 years old. She's lost 35 kilos. She has her full driver's license. She has a full power of attorney over her life again, and full independence. And she is a testament to what you can do when love is the motivating factor, and when you never give up, and when you put in thousands of hours without seeing any results, sometimes for months on end. And and when you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, so to speak, and you just keep grinding forward. And I've written actually a book about that journey. It's called Relentless. This is my third book, How a Mother and Daughter Defied the
Congratulations.
Odds. And it's a book about mindset more than anything. It's our story about her, and there's a lot of running adventures in there as well that show analogies between the two journeys. But it's really about the never giving up. As long as
So
you
let
have
me ask
breath.
you,
Yeah.
what is your secret then to beating? Because it sounds like to me you've beat insurmountable odds. What is your secret to beating insurmountable odds and never giving up?
It's exactly that, never giving up, and not looking for the gains on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you will know this when you've got clients coming in and they want results now. They come in for a week and they go, but it's not working. I'm not losing weight. I don't see any results. I'm not feeling better. Or I take this pill and I expect a miracle. That's not how biology works. And that's not how if you want to take on a massive challenge, you have to be willing to just keep going without any sign of improvement. Like for mum, it would be months on end with no sort of lift in the level of her abilities, and no sort of improvement. And then all of a sudden we'd have a breakthrough, and we'd suddenly have a big jump up. And then only then could I look back and go, hell, we pushed through that plateau and we got to the next level. And then there'll be another plateau, and then the next level. And that really taught me that in everything that you wanted to do, whether it's writing a book or whether it's taking on a big, academic career, or if it's doing something like a rehab journey or being an athlete, it's one step at a time, every day, putting in the hard work and not waiting for, looking for those instant results. So it's persevering through all the naysayers, all the people that tell you it's impossible, it will never happen. Why are you pushing her so hard? Why are you doing this? Now I can turn back. And you like in a journey like this, you're walking into the darkness. You have no idea of the path ahead. There is no path before you. There's no one really to follow. And so you have to take a step, believing that the next step will be illuminated for you, if that makes sense. And just keep going no matter what. And I am like dogged as far as her training goes. 7 days a week, she still trains. We go to the gym 5 days a week. She's training 7 days a week. She doesn't have her birthday off. She doesn't have her Christmas day off. No days,
No
she's
days off.
no days off. I mean, we do rehabilitation stuff and recovery stuff, but the mindset of every day we're learning something, we're improving, and, we're developing. And
Well,
that, I
you
think,
sound like somebody that I'd love to have in my corner. I mean, you sound like a great coach that would coach somebody to greatness. And so let me ask you from that standpoint, um, what are some tips on overcoming obstacles and not letting fear rule your life? Because you sound like you had that time where you had a lot of things
oh
to
yeah.
fear.
Oh yeah, and I think it is, Linda, when you go through so much crap, you learn some tools to get out of that along the way, and then you've got that in your toolbox for next time when it comes and hits you in the face in a different way. And it's really just about, I think some of the basic things that we can do is looking after our health, looking after the foundational principles of health so we have enough strength to fight these things. So good sleep, good nutrition, good movement, good being outside in nature, good connections to your loved ones and your friends, and all of these parts are parts of the puzzle, so that you have the strength when something comes at you to be resilient enough physically and emotionally to deal with it, and then just inching your way forward. And not diving into, and this is so easy to say and so hard to do, and not diving into, I can't sleep, so I'll grab for the sleeping pills. I can't cope, so I'll grab for alcohol or drugs or any of those things that are only in the end going to make it worse, because then it will become a spiral downward and not a spiral upward. It's just never believing the people who want to put limitations on you. So many people have told me, you can't run across the desert, you can't write books, you can't, I'm an epigenetics coach. I do all sorts of things. I've made documentaries, written books, been TV host. I am not qualified for any of those things.
You just made your
And yet I
mind up
do
to
them.
do them.
I just do them. And I just keep going until I know what the hell I'm doing,
I love that. I love that because I feel like that's the secret to life is
Yeah.
many people are stuck in inaction and fear and the imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And so like it's really the secret is just taking those steps for whatever you determine and desire in life and putting one foot in front of the other. It's all about taking action. Why do you say talent isn't as important as mindset?
Yeah, it definitely isn't, and I've proven that because I had no talent as far as running goes, and I have a lack of talent in many areas, but I push through with a mindset of I'm going to do it anyway, and everything sucks at the beginning. It really does. Whether you're starting, I've started to learn to paint, being an artist, I'm hopeless, but I know that if I keep going, then eventually I won't suck at it. But at the moment, it's okay not to be good at it and to push through those times when you're absolutely useless at it, and just keep going because you will improve. And just don't listen to the people who put limitations onto you. They are their limitations. They are their fears. And also that little voice inside your head that keeps going, you can't do that. Who do you think you are? You're not good enough for that. That little voice that we all have that's telling us we're imposters, that imposter syndrome, that's just our programming. That is just our subconscious trying to protect us from failure, but actually holding us back. And that stuff that we often were programmed with as little children by our culture and by our parents and by our peers and the things that happen to us, it doesn't represent who we are today. So that limitation that is in my subconscious that, I'm not good at that, therefore I can't do it, is actually, I want you to re-examine those and go, is that the truth, or is that what happened to 7-year-old Lisa? And that was
Oh
who
my
she was.
gosh, that is so good. So good. So true. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I just wrote an article on imposter syndrome, and when
Yeah.
I read back over it, I realized, oh wow, those fears I overcame, I let those rule my life from the age of 8, like to
Yep.
a very long time before I faced them. And one was like the fear of heights, and one was the fear of
Wow.
public speaking. And
Wow.
they were tied together. And so when you say that, I realize, if you really dial it down and you dial it back, you could really kind of look fear in the face and be like, okay, how old was I? Now
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
kind of
That's
move
not
on from
you.
that. And
Yeah.
then I also really love that what you were saying about basically in my book and on the wall at my gym, it says give yourself permission to suck until you don't. And,
I love it.
and
That's
that's it.
me too.
We don't all start at doing an ultra marathon. It
No.
probably sucked for a while at first, and you just kept on going. And why do you say going all in gives you the best chance of success? Because you definitely have went all in to do these
Yeah.
extreme marathons.
Yeah, you have to go all in when you have a big challenge ahead of you. You cannot go, well, I'll give it a go, because you will not have the commitment. You will not go through the pain. You will not have the resilience to overcome obstacles if you haven't committed your heart to it. And so you have to pick carefully what you are going to commit to,
There you
because you have
go.
to choose. Yeah,
Yep.
don't take everything and from the FOMO, the fear of missing out. Oh, I'm going to run a marathon and at the same time write a book, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that.
It
You
sounds
you
like
have
me.
to understand every one of those goals is going to require sacrifice. So
Holy
you
crap,
have
they
to,
do.
yeah, and you have to understand and know that you want to sacrifice that for this other thing. And then, so understanding your why and really digging down into the layers of the onion, so to speak, of what your real reason is. And is this worth my time? Is this worth my commitment? And if it is, then go all in it, because when you're not fully committed, you will not get there. Because when the tough times come, and they will come, you won't have the resilience to push through those barriers. So it's spending time just thinking about the goal that you have set for yourself. Is this what I really want? This is what I want. Is this for me? Am I willing to give up my time, my money, my energy for this at the cost of whatever else is going to cost? Because it will
It
cost
does
you.
cost something.
Yeah. And so pick wisely your goals and then go hard after them.
Love that. Love that so much. And I think sometimes what you might find yourself where you may love one thing, but you committed to something else that just requires so much of you that you didn't realize. And maybe it's
Yeah.
something you hate. Like I could think to instances of somebody going to school and that wasn't like their thing. Like they absolutely hated what they signed up for, but yet what made them tick was being an entrepreneur and
Yep.
owning a business. And so I think knowing yourself and also knowing, well, if that thing you committed to isn't really what you want, you can change gears.
Absolutely. And sometimes knowing when to quit, Linda, is also a good thing. Sometimes because I'm obsessive by nature, I don't know when to quit. And I've flogged a dead horse to death in a business or whatever, because I just don't give up.
I
So
know it's
sometimes
so
it's
hard
wise.
for us. I can
Yeah.
see we have very similar personalities because if I
Yep.
commit to something,
Yeah.
it's
It's really hard to let
it's I
go.
feel that I have to see it through because I'm one of those people.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And I've had to learn that in the last few years, is sometimes the best thing that you can do is to let go so that you make space for the next thing. Because sometimes things change and situations change. I had a business, I was a jeweler for many years, and the jewelry industry has undergone massive changes. So like, mass production in China and so on. And so being a one-off pieces and unique and handmade was really no longer that lucrative. And I needed to let it go, but I couldn't let it go, and it took actually mum having her aneurysm to push me off and let go of that. And it was really 3 or 4 years too late. I should have let go earlier, but because you just hang in there and hang in there. So sometimes knowing when to quit is also a virtue.
I love that. I love that. But I love your never die attitude. And so I wouldn't be doing you justice if we didn't at least touch on how, your races. I mean, how many miles, what's the most you've run?
So I've done races 220 Ks at a time. I've done like 338K races over a 5-day periods. I've done 2,250 kilometers through New Zealand, doing 50 to 70 kilometers a day. So that was like in consecutive days, that type of thing. So yeah, there's all different types of events, but a lot of them are very, 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 very long.
And let me tell you, that is like anybody out there just thinking about a 5K or a 10K, like what kind of mindset and what kind of affirmations do you bring to that? I'd love to just hear a few, like three tips on that.
I think, like you grow into it. You don't start out, well, generally you don't start out at the ultra marathon distance. You do your first 5K and then you lift your eyes and go, heck, I did it. Maybe I could do 10, and then you inch your way forward and you sort of expand your horizon that way. And also I think just believing, like sometimes the goal that you set is a huge one, but you have to have the steps to get there. I remember when I ran through New Zealand, I was standing at the start line. I'd been so busy with the organization of this big charity run through my country from one end to the other that I hadn't really contemplated what the heck I was actually going to be doing, which was 500 kilometers a week, which is huge. And it was more than I'd ever done. And I was standing at the start line. I had a panic attack. And I went over to my mum and I was bawling my eyes out going, Mum, what the hell have I done? There's no way in hell that I'm going to be able to do this. It just all of a sudden sat on my chest because I'm looking down the barrel of 2,250 Ks. And my mum said to me, stop looking at the 2,000 plus Ks and start looking at that power pole up there. That's where you've got to run to right now. That's all you have to do. And then we'll look for the first half an hour. That's all you got to do right now. Right now, bring your focus in so that you can cope with it, because sometimes that big goal is just overwhelming and you won't get there if you look at that big goal. So you have to break it down into this power pole, the next 100 meters, the next mile, the next, get through to lunchtime, and then we'll see how we go. There's
small chunks.
Break it down into tiny little chunks so that you can cope with what's at hand.
I love that.
I'm going to have to jump off in a minute, Linda.
Yes.
But
I just want to thank you so much and acknowledge you so much for beating the odds and being such a go-getter, a motivator, and an inspiration today.
Oh, thank you so much, Linda. And if anybody wants to, grab one of my books or check out what I do, please come and visit me at lisatamati.com. That's Tamati. And Linda, I have to have you on my show because your story is awesome. So we'll swap details for that. But thank you for the work that you do for the sisterhood. I think it's epic, and you're fantastic. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. And bye, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sisterhood of Sweat.